Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Real. So, before we get into, I guess, the real content for today, um, just a couple quick updates in the news. So, we have a couple headlines today, just some updates. So we have the United States and Iran obviously having this preliminary agreement with Tehran to end the conflict, and that signing is tomorrow in Geneva. And at the same time, we still have Israel trying to make some major moves in Lebanon, much to President Trump's uh, just against his wishes, I suppose. Uh, President Trump has personally signed the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, and it's sparking a lot of varying reactions globally. Some of his own party members are a bit opposed to it or not very pleased with it, and with the agreement aiming to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And at the same time, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is actually publicly pushed back on claims she had begged Trump for a photo. So that's a bit of random public diplomacy news, and that's it's honestly a bit it for today in terms of major updates regarding Iran. And so for today, on our show, we will be doing something a little bit special. I'm going to be introducing something new here. So before we do, let's get into our not brand new segment, but let me introduce our new segment. Okay, so as you guys saw that, this is now what will be Saber News's election franchise coverage. And so before I go into this, because we're gonna do a little bit of a mock election sort of sorts. But before I go into a single poll, a map, or a single race, I want to explain exactly how American Decision 26 is going to call races this November, because this is something the big networks don't always explain clearly. And I think if you're going to trust a call, you deserve to know what it's based on. So, we will never call a race on polls. Polls tell you what might happen, results tell you what did. And these are two very completely different things, and we must treat them as such. And we don't race to be first, we race to be right. Some of the most famous examples of getting this wrong, election night 2000, which is when multiple networks called Florida for Al Gore, retracted it, they called it for Bush, then retracted that too, all in one night. That happened because they were prioritizing speed over accuracy, and that's not how we operate here over at Saber. And what we actually need to make a call is enough precincts reporting with the outstanding vote mathematically cannot overcome the current margin. And we account for where that outstanding vote is coming from. A candidate trailing by 3 points with 80% in might still be in good shape for the remaining 20% if there is if the remaining 20% is in if the are in the stronghold counties, and we want to wait for that math to be uncatchable. Our language will be consistent and deliberate. If it's too early to call, to lean, to call, we will not deviate from this. If we say lean, the race is not over. If we say call, it is. Too early to call is not a hedge. It just means the math isn't there yet. We say it confidently and not apologetically. So with that being said, this is the kind of data we will watch in November. Between now and November, presidential approval is going to be the strongest predictor of midterm outcomes available this far out, and this is important. This is not what we use to call a race on election night. Watching the polls and calling races are two completely different jobs, and we do both of them separately. So with that being said, on my screen here, we have Donald Trump's approval ratings as of 2026 from uspollingdata.com. We are looking at approved polling percentages of Donald Trump's administration and of Donald himself, at 38.6%. And we covered this in a show previously. on our Sunday show last week. 58% disapprove, and he's down 19.4 points in net approval and 34% in independent approval. And that's also important because, as we covered last week, candidates or presidents who who uh, who score less or have lower percentage rates in these areas, they don't do as well before. And so, why this matters structurally is Trump's second term approval began at 47% at inauguration. It declined steadily and then it hit 38.1 in May of 2026. This is the single lowest approval of either of his terms. And the 34% independent approval figure is the most politically decisive number, as I said. Every president before this who triggered a wave midterm loss saw independent approval fall below 40% before election day. And Trump is now below this 36% level. As we see here, he is over at 36%. And that preceded a 41 seat gain for Democrats in 2018. And in 2018, 90% of voters who disapproved of Trump supported Democratic House candidates, and that this approval to opposition pipeline is the engine of midterm wave elections. So you want to watch these numbers between now and November, and if it moves up significantly, the whole map is going to change. And if it stays here or goes lower, we're looking at a very different night than what most people are expecting. And this is sort of these are sort of the expectations you can hold from Saber News and American Decision. I'm not just reading polls. I'm just trying to tell you. I'm also telling you how exactly these polls mean structurally in terms of these races. Now, if we're talking about national environment, we need to see what the data says before we get to individual races. So before we go race by race, what you need to understand is the national environment, because in midterms especially, local races don't happen in a vacuum. The national environment is everything like the weather, and it's not going to determine the outcome, but it's going to set conditions for everything. So I'm going to pull up this important bit of data here. So this right here, we are tracking the 2026 midterm elections. And as we see here, Democrats lead Republicans on the generic ballot. And now, the generic ballot is the single most important macro number in a midterm. It asks voters nationally whether they'd vote for a Democrat or Republican for Congress without naming specific candidates. And the Morning Consult's current tracker here shows that Democrats are leading the generic ballot D+4 among registered voters, 46% to 42. Among independents specifically, D+12, a 9-point shift toward Democrats since January of 2025. And if we scroll it down, you see all this D4, D12. And in the gender gap, this is actually striking here. Women are at D+11 and men are at R+5. A 16-point gap between genders, and Gen Z breaks D+22. And if we were looking at the trend line here, it's not just the number, it's not just where the number is, it's the direction, and this number has been moving consistently for over a year. Now, if we look at the real clear polling generic congressional vote, RCP aggregates all major pollsters. RCP is real clear polling, and they just aggregate all these major polls like in New York Times, Siena, Morning Consult, things like that, Financial Times. And as of today, the polling aggregate shows that Democrats are going to lead the generic ballot D+7, 48.1% to 41.1%. And that's from the center square. And that is going to represent a 7.5 point swing from Republicans, a 2.7% generic congressional ballot win in 2024. A swing of that magnitude in one cycle is significant. And this is the thing. Generic ballot advantages don't translate directly into seats. This map matters. Gerrymandering, district composition, candidate quality. This is all going to create friction between the national number and the actual seat count. But the direction of this number is going to tell you something real. So yeah, like I said, these important numbers you're watching here in the generic vote. Democrats have a 4.8 spread up over the Republicans. Now, our next important bit of data right here, we have Emerson College is one of the, it's a very fine poll. It's a very good poll. So we're looking at Emerson's April poll. We'll take a look at this. Among likely voters, the most predictive sample shows Democrats ahead 50% to 40% on the generic ballot, as we just saw from these last two bits of data that we went over. And among independents, Democrats are up 19 points, 50% to 31%. And if we go issue by issue, independent voters' disapproval of the administration handling of immigration has increased 17 points in 1 year. The economy, 13 points. Foreign policy, 15 points. And that's from the Carolina Journal. When you see numbers move that fast across that many issues at once, and this isn't random noise, we are seeing patterns here clearly. And as we can see here on the trend line, 43 to 43, 44 to 43, 44 to 44. And we see that Democrats are starting to take a very strong lead against the Republicans. And now a bit of also important history to think of and consider as we go through this is that polls do technically trend to underestimate Republican capability in these races. So you always have to take every poll you see here with a bit of grain of salt, because typically polls will underestimate Republicans in these elections. And now we are going to move to the next piece of data, which is the Brookings the GOP midterm prospects. So in the first 4 months of 2026, the midterm prospects for Republicans have darkened further. Trump's perceived lack of focus on the kitchen table issues may explain why, for the first time since 2010, Democrats are more trusted than Republicans to handle the economy. Democrats have a serious chance of flipping Republican-held seats in North Carolina, Maine, Alaska, and Ohio, while Iowa and Texas are no longer regarded as sure bets for the Republicans, which is a very interesting concept, which is another thing we went over in our last show when we watched that video about Trump in the midterm elections, and how it seems increasingly over the last few years, a blue Texas is starting to seem more possible. So, and we want to find the approval breakdown. So we see here the president's job approval, and this is important as it says right here in every midterm election. We want to just take a look at this. And this is once again real clear polling. They just aggregate all the major pollsters. So, as we see here, 40.6 points in approval for his job approval, and 56.9% that disapprove, and the spread is down 16.3. And actually, as of April 2026, approval for Trump's handling of inflation is at 30%, and the overall economy is 37%. Healthcare is at 29%, and tariffs are at 38%. And I believe this is where, it says it right here, 30, 37, 29. And public approval for tariffs, which is the centerpiece of the president's economic agenda, was 38%. And that says a lot. And of course, at Sabre, we don't really pick sides, but I have been talking to a lot of people, because that's kind of what I do sometimes as a journalist. I ask random people or in my life, or just personal sort of questions, such as like, oh, this X just happened, how do you feel about it, like what are your thoughts? And I was talking to someone recently who does tend to lean towards the administration that we have in terms of approval. And he said to me that he is feeling a lot of the stuff that was promised to them are not quite getting done. So as we can see from these polls, people are very clearly upset about the direction that is being taken, and some people feel a bit left behind, or I guess stolen. And what we read from before, these are his scores on the issues that voters say they care about the most. And inflation is the kitchen table issue they discuss. It's what voters feel every single week at the grocery store. A 30% approval on inflation in 5 months before an election is an incredibly difficult number to overcome. And this is something actually sometimes politicians forget about, is that economic indicators or certain political issues. Sometimes, most times, honestly, you'll see is that the voter doesn't really care about these economic indicators or what they're going to do to fix those, because those are for economists. What really um, gets a voter behind a candidate are these kitchen table issues such as inflation. And another interesting to note is that for the first time since 2010, Democrats are more trusted than Republicans to handle the economy. And that's a structural shift worth naming. The economy has been Republican territory for years. Excuse me. And the comparison between now and 2018 is another very interesting thing to note as well. And in 2018, the midterm results came out in a 40-seat loss for Republicans and a shift to Democratic control of the House. Trump's approval at that election in 2018 for the midterms was at 45%, markedly higher than where he is right now. Exit polls from 2018 showed Trump's approval at 45%, and yet Democrats still gained 41 seats. And if we remember, looking back at his current approval, 38.6%, 7 points lower than what he already lost in 41 seats. And the structural wrinkle here is a 9.7 swing netted Democrats 41 seats in 2018. That same swing in 2026 would only garner Democrats about 23 seats. Because by 2024, more than 84% of House candidates won by margins of 10 points or more, meaning fewer seats are genuinely competitive, and gerrymandering has consolidated safe seats on both sides. So the environment might be as bad or worse than 2018 for Republicans, but the map is more favorable to them than it was for them then. And this is the central tension of this election. The data looks bad for Republicans, and the map protects them more than it did back in 2018. But the question is, which factor do you guys think will win out in November? And that's a question you want to keep in mind between now and November and when you reach the ballot box. And another thing that we also covered in our last stream for Real Iraeta when we were watching that video was the House majority math and what it's going to actually take to win a Senate House majority. So now that we have sort of this national environment established, let's talk about the specific math of flipping the House, because it's going to be tighter than most people are going to realize. So that being said, I'm going to pull up some more things to look at right here. Okay, now we are looking at the Cook Political Report 2026 House ratings. The current 2026 House ratings from Cook Political Report. And this is the 270 to win. It's just a very popular election projection website. You can make your own maps, sort of this stuff. And this is just sort of a starting point. We could edit this if we wanted. However, I'm just going to teach you how to read it, is why I'm here. So, as we see here, we have lots of colors. You see there's sort of this beige, red, blue, light red. So, everything you see in dark red or dark blue is safe and not competitive. So, as you can see, we have Utah right here, a little blue right here in that district. Let's see. I don't think we can zoom in. Oh, we can zoom in. So if you want to come over here, and this is actually interesting, but once you zoom in, you see, we have a big district right here that is safe blue, and so we have two districts, safe blue, and two districts safe red here in Utah. And California right here, a primarily blue state. We see a light blue here, California District 48, and all sorts of stuff like that. And everything you see that's going to be pink or light blue, so like this kind of pink, this light blue, is a likely or a lean. So as we see, a party's going to have an advantage, but it's not locked up. And everything in beige is a toss-up and could go genuinely either way. And so this is one of those districts right here. the toss-up district, Washington 33, Washington District 3, and right now that seat belongs to Marie Perez since 2023. It's her eighth term. We come over here to Iowa. We have districts 3 and 1 are both toss-ups. In Wisconsin, we have District 3, another toss-up. And if we actually want to, and every yellow district on this map is going to determine, is a race that's going to determine who controls the Congress. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I think that should be it. Let me check Florida. Yeah, so 15. I think I counted 15. 15 toss-ups right now, and most of them are currently held by Republicans, as Republicans currently hold a 217 to 212 margin in the House. And with one independent, and they have 5 seats vacant, and Democrats need a net gain of those roughly 5 seats to flip this majority. And the Cook Political Report has rated 17 toss-up House races, and 14 of those seats are currently held by Republicans, as we just mentioned. And we're actually going to take a look at that exact Cook Political Report right now, I believe. Okay, so as we see here, so we have House rating summaries. We have solid seats. So the Democrats have 182 solid seats, while the Republicans have 190. And if we look here at likely and lean seats for House rating seat, for House seats in the House, we have Democrats have 23 likely. So it means these guys who are over here at the Cook Political Report have rated 23 seats to be likely Democrat and 22 seats to be Republican. Now over here in the Senate, we see these vacant seats, and we see Democrats have 46 seats, and the Republicans have 50, 5 seats in total, and an independent is holding one of these seats. And then obviously 24 Democratic governors compared to the 26. And especially in the House ratings here at the top, we have a pretty competitive seats on both sides here. And Republicans have 8 more solid seats than Democrats coming in the House. But these competitive seats heavily favor Democratic pickups, and that's the whole map. And if we want to go in sort of historically here, since 1946, the president's party has lost seats in the House 18 out of 20 midterm elections, 90% of the time, a fact I brought up in our last stream. The historical average loss is 28 House seats. Democrats just need 5. And let me say that again. The historical average loss is 28 House seats. Democrats just need 5. So historically, we see in these elections, in situations like this, the average loss is 28, and Democrats are only going to need 5 to gain control again, or to flip that, to at least flip the House or the Senate. And the historical average would give Democrats nearly 6 times what they need. Every president whose approval was below 50% heading into a midterm, they actually lost House seats without exception going back to Truman. The only 2 exceptions to this historical pattern are worth knowing because they explain what would have happened for what would have had to happen for Republicans to hold these seats. In 1994, first off, was Clinton, but that was the Republican Revolution sweeping Newt Gingrech's contract with America. And in 2002, when George W. Bush had a 63% approval post 9/11. So for Republicans to hold the House, something comparable to September 11th would have had to have happened between now and November, and completely reverse the national environment. That's not impossible, just incredibly rare. The number of announced congressional retirements as of March 2026, which is 56, already exceeds the 52 seen at the exact same point in 2018. The last time Democrats flipped the House, retirements matter because open seats are harder to defend than incumbents. And what we're looking to watch specifically this upcoming election night for the House is that Virginia is going to close polls at 7 p.m. Eastern, the earliest of any competitive state. Virginia competitive districts are sort of your first data point of the night. And if they go blue early and strongly, the environment is real, and you're going to start seeing some of these patterns follow suit. And where the real battlefields are in suburban districts. College educated suburban voters, particularly women, who shifted towards Republicans slightly in 2024, but whose approval of Trump has since cratered. And these voters live in the light pink and yellow districts on the map, like we saw earlier. And you can use fundraising as a signal. Candidates don't raise money in races they don't think they can win. Watch FEC filings between now and October for which Republican incumbents are suddenly flush with defensive spending. That tells you where the NRCC thinks they are vulnerable. And if we pull up this map once again, let me pull it up. And if we just, as we look through the map, find out, just kind of look at the places near where you live and see where exactly you can see some of those exact patterns I just mentioned right here. For example, like if you live in Iowa, you got, and looking at this right here, if you live in Iowa, chances are this is a pretty large part of Iowa. And so if you're in Iowa, you have a good chance of being in these two toss-up districts. So you can look at your areas and your politicians in just your district 1 and 3. Look at them. You can see their FEC filings between now, starting now, and so also from previously, and see exactly what they're trying to accomplish through indicators like this. And now we are going to talk about some of these actual races. So we will talk first about North Carolina. It's one of the key races here for the Senate. Okay, and oops. So we have North Carolina right here. So the current consensus forecast is 47 for Democrats. And this is their lean rating. And then this is the seat counter. We had the seat counter up a second ago. Republicans currently hold a 53 to 47 margin over the Democrats in the Senate in terms of seats. And Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats for a working majority. And North Carolina would be this fourth domino. Oh, I forgot what color it was. There we go. Light blue. So it's leaning Democrat right now. And if Democrats don't flip North Carolina, an open seat in a purple state with their strongest possible candidate, the Senate math will get very difficult very fast. And now if we want to look at this right here, this is going to have this should have a full trend line of Roy Cooper's chance to win this election for the Senate here, or not here in North Carolina, but in North Carolina. So as 270 to win, and as this right here, they both have North Carolina leaning Democrat, meaning it is likely to result in a Democratic win. So we have Roy Cooper here with an 89.7% chance to win this election over Michael Watley's 10.3% chance, with a projected margin of victory at 14.4% ahead. And here's the trend line. So we have August 2025. So everything as we see here is starting to, this is all back here. So we see at 76% versus Michael Watley. He's down here over in the 20s. And Roy Cooper is over here in the 70s. See down here. And then Michael Watley's going to take a dip. Roy Cooper's going to take a jump. And in May 2026, I think Watley's up 11. Or Watley's name recognition is actually only at 25%. Right here. Oh, sorry. May 2025. So right here. Yeah. You see, jump down all the way to 25. And that's his favorability, too. Cooper's nearly at 50, and that gap is basically the whole story. And just for your information, we'll throw up a photo of the candidate, the Democratic candidate for North Carolina, which is Roy Cooper. This is Roy Cooper. He is a former two-term governor who has won 6 statewide races in North Carolina, dating all the way back to 2000. 5 of them in years when the Republican the presidential nominee won the state. And that last point is the most important biological fact in this race. He knows how to win. In a state, especially in a state that's going to lean against him, he's done it a few times, and that's if you do it more than once, it's not luck. He's got to know something. Cooper actually declined to be considered as Kamala Harris's running mate back in 2024, at least reportedly, because he was already thinking about the Senate run, and he's waiting for the right moment. And this is a guy who's been running statewide since 2000, and he knows every county in North Carolina. This is institutional knowledge that will benefit him on election day. And now, if we want to go look at the Republican candidate here for North Carolina Senate race, Michael Whatley. This is him. So, he's a former Republican National Committee chair who was personally recruited by Donald Trump but has never run for office before. And his RNC background is going to mean he's going to know a thing or two about campaigning. But knowing how to run other people's campaign versus being the candidate yourself are two completely different skill sets. Only 25.4% of North Carolina voters view him favorably, as we see right here. And right now, as of June 19th, that's at 10.3% of chance to win. And a significant chunk simply don't know who he is. Of people in North Carolina don't know who he is. In a 6-month campaign, building name recognition from essentially zero while closing an 11-point gap is an enormous ask. And what Michael Whatley is arguing here is that a career politician with the universal name recognition should obviously be pulling ahead at this stage, and that the race is going to tighten as it gets real. And that's a fair point historically. We've seen these gaps close before, but the question is whether he's going to close these 11 points. And if we're looking at some polls here for North Carolina, so the latest Carolina Journal poll as of May 2026, Cooper is at 49.8% and Whatley is at 38.7%, an 11-point gap, as I've mentioned, widening from 7.8 points in March. The University of Virginia's Center for Politics has upgraded the race from a toss-up to lean Democrat. Once again, as 270 to win has reflected right here. Specifically citing Cooper polling at nearly 50%, the threshold that historically indicates a candidate is on track to win. And actually, among registered independents, Cooper is going to lead 52 to 32%, which is a 20-point gap. In a state where Trump won by 3 points in 2024, that independent number is pretty decisive. And so what you're looking to watch here in North Carolina on election night is Mecklenburg County, which is in Charlotte, and Wake County, which is in Raleigh. And these will report relatively early. If Cooper is running up late margins in the urban centers, he's going to be on track to win. And if Whatley keeps it close, it means the rural and exurban vote is doing actual work. And the question when it comes to ticket split is that Trump won North Carolina by 3 points back in 2024. And for Cooper to win, to have voters split their ticket, choosing a Democrat for Senate while the state leans Republican on this presidential level, Cooper has made a career of winning those voters. Watch whether the 2026 environment is strong enough for him to do it again. And a Democrat winning North Carolina Senate seat for the first time since 2008 would be one of the signature results for that night. And this is also something important to think about, is that North Carolina has burned Democrats before. They've led in polls and lost here on election day. And does that track record concern you guys? Or do you think it's going to concern these candidates? Or do you think Roy Cooper will be different here? That's all for you to decide. And as I always mention when I talk about these polls, these polls do tend to underestimate Republican capability and their chances to win. And now for our second Senate race, we have Ohio. Brown versus Houston. So this is the Ohio race right here. It's a toss-up. So it's recently moved from a lean Republican up to a toss-up, or to a toss-up. And Ohio moving from lean Republican to a toss-up is what is going to open up this Senate math. And this is the race that's going to keep Republican strategists up at night. And we're going to look at the Cook political report on this one right here. So this is an incumbent running. We see right here, obviously, it moved from a... Oh, we're making a subscribe. Wow, that's great. So I'll just tell you what I have written down here for my notes. So the backstory here for this is one of the most dramatic individual narratives of the cycle. So Sherrod Brown, he did serve in the Ohio Senate for 18 years, and he's the Democratic candidate here. He was the archetype for the blue-collar Democrat who could win in Trump country, and he won re-election in 2018 when Trump was already deeply unpopular in holding a seat in a state that was visibly turning red. And back in 2024, he lost the seat to Republican Bernie Moreno, 50.1% to 46.5%, ending in an 18-year Senate career. That loss came the same night Trump won Ohio by 11 points. And he came back anyway. Less than a year after losing, he announced he was running again, this time against an appointed incumbent in a race nobody initially expected to be competitive. And now, if we actually take a good look at these candidates and a bit of who they are, we're going to pull up some photos so you guys can see your candidates. I don't know if any of you guys live in Ohio. And this is Sherrod Brown. So in his brand in Ohio has always been economic populism. He talks about trade, manufacturing jobs, and working class voters in a way that cuts across party lines. In 2018, when Democrats nationally lost ground, he won Ohio by 6 points. And this tariff issue is fascinating for Brown especially. He's been a vocal critic of trade policy and other things that ship manufacturing jobs overseas for his entire career. Trump's tariffs do create an unusual dynamic where a Democrat and a Republican president have sometimes been on the same side of this trade argument, but they always have very different executions. And 30% of non-MAGA Republicans in Ohio say they'd vote for Brown over Houston, and that's the crossover number that will define this race. And I have not been sharing my screen. There we go. This is Sherrod Brown. And looking at John Husted, Ohio's Republican candidate, he was appointed to fill the seat vacated by J.D. Vance when he became the vice president, meaning Husted has never faced Ohio voters as a senator. He was previously lieutenant governor and secretary of state. So he's not an unknown, but there is a difference between winning a down-ballot stateside race and holding a Senate seat in a competitive midterm environment. He has no major scandals, no significant vulnerabilities beyond his appointment, and his liability is simply that he's tied to Trump in a year when Trump's approval in Ohio has cratered. And we have on here an article from The Hill discussing a Fox News poll that found Brown leading Ohio Senate race by 8 points as Trump favorability drops. And as I've mentioned before, Donald Trump's approval rating is at 38.6% as of recently. And in the Fox News poll, 53% of respondents backed Brown, while 45% backed Houston. That's an 8-point margin right there. And now, mind you, that's not MSNBC or the New York Times. That's a Fox News poll. Brown up 8. That tells you something about how real this shift is. Trump's favorability in Ohio has swung more than 20 points negative since 2024, from a plus 6 net positive point positive in November to minus 15 today. Trump won Ohio by 11 points back in 2024, and his favorability since has collapsed by 21 points in that same state. Houston is caught in that undertow. And the dramatic reversal that we're going to see here is August 2025, Houston leads Brown 50 to 44%, and Brown is the underdog. March 2026, dead heat within the margin of error. And now, here in June 2026, we have Brown leading 53 to 45%. That is a 14-point swing in 10 months. In Ohio, a state that has been trending Republican for a decade, and that's not a polling blip. That's a trend with a real story behind it. There's real weight behind some of these reversals and some of these trends we're seeing very clearly. And what you guys need to watch on election night is Cuyahoga County, which is in Cleveland, and Franklin County, Columbus. And Brown needs to run up massive margins in urban centers to offset the rural vote. And watch Hamilton County, which has cities like Cincinnati. And if Brown is competitive there, a suburb that has been swinging blue, it signals the environment that is translating into real votes. One in four Ohio voters said they might still change their mind before voting. But this race is genuinely fluid going into November, and you could be watching this deep into the night. And so Sherrod Brown lost a seat in 2024 and came back to run again. That could either be seen as fearless or it's delusional. But what do you think it is, and how does it change how seriously you guys take his chances? That is for you guys to decide. And moving on from Senate races, we're going to be talking about some of these bellwether districts. So specifically, I want to talk about Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District, Van Orden versus to be determined, since that primary isn't closed yet. And this will be your canary in your coal mine. So, coming back to the 272 win map right here, we have, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the districts I glanced over briefly when we were taking the first look at this map, is Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. As we see here, Derek Van Orden has had control, has had this seat specifically since 2023. This is his 2nd term. And when I call this one on November 3rd, I'll tell you exactly when I'm calling it, and I'll tell you what it means for the rest of the night. And you might be asking why I'm talking about this specific district in that specific way. And Democrats are running against Republican incumbent Representative Derek Van Orden in a western Wisconsin district that came within 3 points of flipping in 2024, and polling already shows Democrats are leading. And once again, as I always say, these polls do tend to underestimate Republicans, with independents having moved sharply against the Republican incumbent. And now, this is not a deep red district, per se. Western Wisconsin does have a history of ticket splitting union households and the kind of blue-collar voters who went for Obama, then Trump, and are now movable again. The open Wisconsin governor's race is driving Democratic turnout statewide, giving the party a structural advantage down this ballot. And results from Wisconsin's 3rd district come at a reasonable hour. You won't be waiting until 2 a.m. to hear some of these results. And I'm gonna give you guys 3 scenarios and what exactly this could mean. So you can either see Democrats will flip Wisconsin's 3rd district early, and this is in wave territory. This environment is strong enough to take seats that should be difficult. Start adjusting your House and majority projection towards Democratic control. And if in the situation where District 3 in Wisconsin is too close to call by midnight, it's going to be a competitive night and not a wave. Republicans are holding the line in places they should be defending, and House outcome would be genuinely uncertain. And in the last scenario, where Van Orden and the Republicans will hold the seat comfortably, the polls were wrong. Democratic enthusiasm did not translate to votes, and it's going to be a long night for the blue team and a long night for anyone predicting a Democratic wave. And this is why we picked bellwethers. You don't need to watch all 435 races at once. You watch the right ones in the right order, and you can read the story of the night before half the results are even in. And we have here Cook political rating, or report, sorry, House race ratings. So we have a lot of stuff right here. So this is the full list of toss-up and lean races. So we see all the races right here um, that are toss-ups. So we have Arizona's District 1, Arizona District 6, California 22, Colorado 8, Florida 25, Iowa 1, Iowa 3, Michigan 7, New Jersey 7, New York 17, Ohio 9, Pennsylvania 7, 8, 10, Texas 34, Virginia 20, oh sorry, Virginia 2, and Washington's 3rd district and Wisconsin's 3rd district. And so that's 18 races that are rated as toss-ups. 10 are Democratic held and 8 are Republican held. Republicans need to hold their toss-ups just to stay where they're at. And Republicans have to run the table on their toss-ups and pick off Democratic held seats just to hold their 5-seat majority. And Democrats are going to have a much wider path to that scenario. And so going back to the scenarios I mentioned previously, what outcome, like what do these outcomes actually mean? And this is sort of the payoff here. Every number we've looked at tonight leads here what actually happens on November 3rd and what it means for the next 2 years. And if we take a look here, in prediction markets have become a very interesting form of signaling. And a prediction market is not a poll. This is a prediction market. This is just where people can put money behind these outcomes. And when you see a percentage here, that's the market's current estimate of probability of each scenario. It is not perfect. Markets can be wrong, but it is something to consider alongside polling and forecasting. So as I've said, this is not things to take as gospel or as fact. It is simply a data point to consider when you look at some of these events. And so if we're looking at all the current odds here, we have Democrats sweep, meaning they take they gain all these seats and they regain control. So basically, right here, the number you're looking at right here is this dollar figure right here, 2,024,978, and that is the volume of how many trades or predictions, I suppose you could predictions people have made on this. So we can clearly see, so this little light blue trend line right here is the percentage, that trend line specifically is tracking, just which one's leading, right? So as we can clearly see, these people who come into these prediction markets have strong faith that Democrats will sweep. And as I said, this is not fact. This is just something to keep in mind. And as we can see, there's honestly not a lot of faith behind this idea of a Democratic Senate and Republican House. And the next, and besides these traders in these markets having strong faith in Democrats sweeping, the next closest one would be a Republican Senate and a Democratic House. And in these scenarios where Republicans hold both chambers, what would have to happen for this to actually happen is that Trump approval ratings reverse significantly and immediately. So going from 38.6 to over 40, nearing 50. Republican fundraising is going to hold an advantage in every competitive district, and Democratic enthusiasm is always going to fail to materialize on Election Day, and that polling is systematically wrong in Republicans' favor again. And what it's going to mean for the next 2 years is that Trump's legislative agenda is going to continue unimpeded. The second half of his second term looks like the first half. Budget reconciliation, potential further executive actions, and no oversight from either chamber. For supporters of the administration, this is the mandate confirmed scenario, and for critics, it is the last institutional check on the executive branch before the 2028 presidential race. And the likelihood is based on current data, low but non-zero. History has been surprised there before. Now looking at the other scenario, Democrats flip the House, Republicans hold the Senate, which I believe is that scenario is, that scenario is the second most likely according to these poly market traders. So what's going to have to happen for that 36% chance event to happen? So Democrats net 5 more seats
in the House, and that's well within historical norms given current approval ratings. And while failing to overcome the difficult Senate map that requires four net gains in the Republican-leaning territory, what that's going to mean for the next 2 years is that this is a divided government scenario, and it fundamentally changes how Washington operates. House Democrats have publicly stated they have a long list of investigations they want to launch if they flip the House, targeting the administration's handling of immigration, DOJ independence, and financial conflicts of interest, and subpoena power shifts. Oversight hearings would probably begin, and every administration official becomes a potential witness. The legislative phase of Trump's presidency is going to effectively end, and any bill requires bipartisan support in the House, which is unlikely on Donald Trump and the Republican Party's major priorities. Trump would govern primarily through executive action, most likely for the remainder of his term, and that would be the most likely outcome based on the current data. The next scenario, which would be Democrats flipping both chambers, meaning a Democrat sweep, which Poly Market once again shows us at 43%. And once again, this is not a guaranteed fact, and this is just based on what people put their money on, because this is people just basically betting on things happening in life, basically.
Because on Poly Market, you can just kind of bet on anything. Like, for example, the results of the 2026 midterms. So it's not necessarily something you could just say is true or straight fact, but it's a pretty good indicator of what people are feeling, right? Regular, everyday people are feeling. So what's going to have to happen for Democrats to flip both chambers is a genuine wave, a net of 5 House seats and 4 Senate seats in a map that heavily favors Republicans. That requires Ohio and North Carolina to flip Democratic, plus 2 more Senate upsets in states like Alaska and Maine, while holding Democratic-held seats, including Georgia. And what that would mean for the next 2 years is a maximum institutional friction. Both chambers would immediately turning to oversight, and congressional investigations would be front-loaded, committees seeking to build public records well before the 2028 election, and any Trump legislation dies in committee. Veto override attempts are unlikely, but oversight hearings become the defining feature of Washington. This scenario would set up 2028 as a direct referendum of the administration with both chambers as the opposing platform. And this requires the environment to be bad or as worse as 2018. So it's possible, but it's not currently the likely outcome given the Senate math. And sort of the last scenario that is possible is the status quo holds and narrow changes only happen. And what would have to happen here is that polling is systematically wrong in Republicans' favor, and Democratic enthusiasm gaps fail to close. And structural map advantages would have to outperform the national environment. And what that means? So close to nothing would change legislatively, and the story becomes whether Democrats can make this the case for 2028, having failed to capitalize on what looked to be a favorable environment. And this scenario would also prompt serious questions about the reliability of current polling methodology. In the third consecutive cycle, where polls underestimate Republican performance. And based on the data tonight, the approval numbers, the generic ballot, the historical precedent, and the specific race ratings, scenario B is probably going to be the most likely outcome. So that would be Democrats flip the House, but Republicans keep the Senate. Divided governments for the last 2 years of Trump's second term. But I want to be clear, this is a read on probabilities. This is not a prediction. 5 months is a political lifetime, and we'll be updating this map every week between now and November 3rd, whether on here or on our other show, Digital Newsroom. And before we close out, I want to talk about what you should actually expect November 3rd, because election night coverage can be confusing if you don't quite understand the structure of the results coming in. So, poll closing times and a bit of a timeline for that night is at 7 p.m. Eastern. Virginia and Georgia will close. The first 2 competitive data points of the night. Virginia House races are your earliest bellwether. At 7:30, North Carolina closes. Cooper versus Whatley results will start to come in, and this will be called or not called, depending on how early some of these results and how decisive these margins are looking. At 8 p.m. Eastern, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania will close their polls. Ohio Senate results begin, and this is where the night starts to take shape. Wisconsin will close at 9 p.m. Eastern, and Wisconsin District 3 results will start coming in, your bellwether district and your canary in the coal mine. At 10 p.m., you'll see Iowa and most western states close. Senate races in Iowa start to clarify. 11 p.m. Eastern, western states, California, Washington, Oregon, lots of competitive House seats. And late at night, we have Alaska closing at 1 a.m. Eastern. If the Senate is genuinely close, Alaska could matter. And on November 3rd, we will be live from the open, and I'll walk you through results in real time using the methodology we established tonight. When I call a race, you will know exactly what it means and what exactly I base it on. And what American Decision 26 will have on election night is live results feed open on screen throughout. House majority counter that's going to update in real time as we call seats. The Senate tracker will be the same. The bellwether board, which is Wisconsin District 3, and 2 or 3 other early indicators will establish between now and November. And the call criteria card, so that every call we make, the audience will know exactly what we needed to see before we make that call, so you know exactly why we made these calls. And what would you guys want to see on election night coverage? What would make this feel the most relatable and understandable, and the most just accessible for you guys? Because that's what we do at Saber News. We are here to give accessible and easy information, and also just regular information. No spin. It's just how it is. We just tell the facts how they come. And the question to think about is, what are you guys going to do when you reach the ballot box? Because it's very important that if you can vote, you go vote. Because if you feel unhappy with whatever direction, whatever government or whoever is in charge, if you feel unhappy with the way they're taking it, the only way to really at least do something about it is to go vote. Because when you vote, you are showing exactly where your heart is at, and hopefully get the guy you want to be in power. And of course, whether you are happy or not happy, that's always for you to decide. That's not my job to tell you whether you should be happy or not, because that's my job as a journalist. Is I'm just here to tell you guys uh, and explain the events that come out of these governments and these other things, and then I tell you guys just exactly what happened, and then from there it is your job, or not your job. It's your job to decide for yourself what you want to think, because media corporations and news companies should not be telling you what to think. They should be telling you what the facts are and what to do with these facts and how to make your own informed decisions. So, with that being said, my name is Elijah Iraeta. I am the editor in chief of Saber News. This is my show, Real Iraeta, and we're here on Real Iraeta every Friday and Sunday. Just kind of going over a couple headlines every so often, a bit of entertainment, reaction content. On Mondays and Wednesdays is our primary news coverage segment called Digital Newsroom. I'm there on Mondays and Wednesdays at 12, just going over headlines and talking news. It's just like regular news coverage, and I just tell you the facts. And at the end, or throughout the whole thing, you just get to decide what you want to think, because free thinking Americans are very powerful. And thinking for ourselves is how we got this country in the first place, and it is a fantastic country we have. And what makes it so fantastic are people like you guys who think for yourselves and make your own decisions, because that's the whole point, because this is a free country and we get to do the things we like to do based on our hearts and what they want. So with that being said, thank you for everyone for watching this stream today and for being here for the first segment of American Decision 26. You'll be seeing American Decision 26 continue to pop up throughout our streams, Digital Newsroom, even here. And but yeah, we're just going to be getting ready for November 3rd, where you guys will see us on our established news programming for election night coverage. And we'll be there giving you the facts and telling you exactly what everything means, and telling you just sort of what's happening, just directly how it is. And we're not here to put any spin. We're not here to cheerlead or to doom. We're just here to go through the facts and what this is going to mean for the results coming out. So with that being said, I'm Elijah Ireta, editor in chief of Saber News, signing off. I hope we all have a fantastic rest of our day this Friday. It's the weekend, and we'll have a party. I'll be back here on Sunday at 4 p.m. on Real Ireta. And thank you for everyone for watching. And if you like this content, I highly suggest you follow. And if you're tired of being told what to think and you want to start doing things yourself, I highly recommend you follow because I'm here to help you be the best version of yourself. And yeah, so I'm Elijah signing off. Have a great day.